The DNA test results sat on my desk like a loaded gun. 3 white envelopes, 3 kids, 3 chances for my world to make sense again. I'd already opened Emma's 99.9% probability of paternity. 2 more to go, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. My name is David Brennan, and 6 weeks ago, I discovered my wife of 14 years had been living a double life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare actually started. Not with some mysterious text message or lipstick on a collar, but with my father's death and a 7-figure inheritance that turned my marriage into a crime scene. Dad passed in early March. Pancreatic cancer, quick and brutal. 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. I was his only child, and he'd built a successful commercial real estate business in Phoenix over 40 years. When the estate lawyer, Patricia Vance, called me into her office on March 15th, I expected a straightforward reading of the will. What I didn't expect was the codicil he'd added 2 months before his death. "Your father was very specific about this provision," Patricia said, sliding a document across her mahogany desk. "The bulk of the estate, approximately $3.2 million, goes to you with one condition. He wanted you to have a complete financial audit of your household accounts for the past 5 years before the inheritance is distributed." I laughed. Actually laughed. "That's weird, but okay. Why?" Patricia's expression didn't change. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, and had the kind of face that had seen every family drama imaginable. "He didn't say, but he was adamant. He hired a forensic accountant to conduct the audit. The funds will be held in trust until the audit is complete and reviewed by you personally." Did he think I was bad with money or something? He didn't share his reasoning with me, David, but I've known your father for 23 years. He didn't do anything without a good reason. I shrugged it off. My wife Melissa and I had a solid marriage. We lived in Scottsdale, had 3 great kids, Emma, 12, Jacob, 9, and Sophie, 6. I worked as a senior project manager for a tech company, pulling in about $140K a year. Melissa had been a stay-at-home mom since Emma was born. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Our finances were joint accounts, total transparency. What could an audit possibly find? The forensic accountant, a guy named Robert Davis, no, strike that, Robert Walsh, delivered his report on April 2nd. 47 pages of transactions, spreadsheets, and highlighted irregularities. I sat in my home office on a Tuesday afternoon, Melissa out with Sophie at a dance class, and started reading. Page 3 made my stomach drop. Over the past 5 years, Melissa had systematically withdrawn $127,000 from our joint savings and checking accounts. The withdrawals were small enough not to trigger my attention. $500 here, $800 there, occasional $2,000 chunks. She'd categorized them in our budgeting app as groceries, kids' activities, household expenses, clothing. But Walsh had cross-referenced every withdrawal with actual spending. The money had gone somewhere else entirely. Page 8 showed where: a separate checking account at a different bank, opened in her name only, 4 months after Sophie was born. January 2018. Page 12 showed what the money funded: rent payments to a luxury apartment complex in Tempe. The same amount, $1,850, paid on the first of every month for the past 5.5 years. My hands went numb. I kept reading. Cell phone records. Walsh had subpoenaed them as part of the audit, apparently something Dad had arranged legal authorization for before he died. Thousands of texts to a number registered to a man named Tyler Kowalski. The texts started in September 2017, before Sophie was born. Walsh's report included a background check. Tyler Kowalski, 36 years old, personal trainer at an upscale gym in Tempe. Never married, no kids on record. The same gym where Melissa had a membership. The gym she'd joined in August 2017, saying she wanted to get back in shape after having Jacob. I sat there as the afternoon light faded through the blinds, reading every page twice. Walsh had done his job with surgical precision. Bank statements, credit card receipts, GPS data from Melissa's phone, apparently extracted from Google location history, even photographs from social media that placed her at locations she'd claimed she'd never been. The apartment in Tempe, Tyler's apartment. My wife had been living two lives, one with me and our kids in Scottsdale, another with her trainer in a luxury apartment 20 minutes away, funded by money she'd siphoned from our accounts while I worked 60-hour weeks to provide for our family. The report didn't speculate about the kids. That wasn't Walsh's job. But the timeline screamed at me from the pages. Melissa and Tyler's relationship started September 2017. Sophie was born May 2018. I did the math backward, conception around August or September 2017. The same month Melissa joined that gym. I closed the report and sat in the dark. Didn't turn on the lights, didn't move. Just sat there while my brain tried to process what my marriage actually was versus what I'd believed it to be. Around 7, I heard the garage door open. Melissa's voice, bright and cheerful, calling out that they were home. Sophie's little feet running through the house, yelling for me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Just sat there in my office chair, the report on my lap, while my 6-year-old daughter knocked on the door asking if I wanted to see her new dance moves. That's when I knew I had to find out the truth about my kids. All of them. The DNA results for Jacob sat in my laptop bag for 3 days before I opened them. I kept finding excuses. A critical work deadline, Sophie's dentist appointment, the dishwasher flooding the kitchen floor. But really, I was just afraid. I finally tore open the envelope on Thursday night after everyone went to bed. The kitchen light hummed overhead as I unfolded the paper with shaking hands. Probability of paternity. 0.0%. Jacob wasn't mine. I read it 4 times, each pass making the words more real and less comprehensible. 9 years of baseball practices and homework help and bedtime stories. 9 years of being his father. Except I wasn't. Not biologically. The 3rd envelope sat on the counter, Sophie's name printed on the lab label. I already knew what it would say. The timeline matched too perfectly, her conception coinciding exactly with when Melissa had started the Tempe apartment. But I opened it anyway, needing the confirmation like a man pressing on a bruise. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. 2 out of 3. Tyler Kowalski had fathered 2 of my children. I sat at the kitchen table until 3 a.m., staring at the papers spread before me like evidence at a crime scene. Which is what this was, really. A crime against our family, our marriage, everything I'd believed about my life. The rage came later, around 4 a.m., hot and electric. I wanted to wake Melissa up, throw the results in her face, watch her scramble for explanations that didn't exist. But I didn't. Because I'd learned something from the forensic audit. Patience produced better outcomes than impulse. Instead, I spent Friday organizing. I photographed every document Robert Walsh had provided. I scanned the DNA results and saved them in 3 separate cloud accounts. I created a detailed timeline, the apartment lease, the cash withdrawals, the children's birth dates, everything. By Friday evening, I had a plan. Saturday morning, Melissa announced she was taking the kids to her mother's house in Scottsdale for the day. Mom wants to see them, she said, loading juice boxes into her bag. We'll be back around dinner. Actually, I said, why don't you go alone? I'll keep the kids here. We can do a movie day. She looked surprised. You sure? I thought you had work stuff. It can wait. Spend time with your mom. The eagerness in her eyes made my stomach turn. She probably had plans to meet Tyler. Maybe the apartment was still active. Robert's report only covered through last month. Okay, great. She kissed each kid goodbye, then me, her lips dry against my cheek. I'll be back around 6. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, then turned to the kids. Change of plans. We're going to Grandma's house after all. Emma frowned. But Mom just... Different Grandma. My mom. She's been asking to see you guys. It was true, though I hadn't planned this visit until yesterday. I needed the kids somewhere safe, somewhere Melissa couldn't use them as leverage when everything came apart. The drive to my mother's house in Chandler took 40 minutes. Mom met us at the door, her face carefully neutral. I'd called her last night, told her everything. She'd cried, then gotten angry, then went quiet in that dangerous way she had. Go on inside, she told the kids. I made cookies. As they stampeded past her, she gripped my arm. You're sure about this? I'm sure. And you have everything you need? Everything. She studied my face, then nodded. Be smart, David. Don't do anything that'll hurt you later. I won't. But I was lying, and we both knew it. I drove to Tempe, to the address Robert Walsh had provided. The apartment complex was nicer than I'd expected. Not luxury, but well-maintained, with a pool and covered parking. Building C, Unit 218. Melissa's car sat in a visitor spot near the building entrance. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Part of me had hoped I was wrong, that maybe she really had gone to her mother's, that the apartment was just a past mistake she'd ended. But no. Here she was, probably upstairs with Tyler right now, in the bed my stolen money had paid for. I parked 3 spaces down and waited. 20 minutes later, they emerged together. Tyler looked exactly like his gym's website photo. Tall, muscular, that particular brand of handsome that came from spending 4 hours daily in front of mirrors. He had his arm around Melissa's waist, his hand resting possessively on her hip. They were laughing about something. I took photos. Lots of photos. The two of them walking to his truck. Him opening her door. The kiss before she climbed in. Not a peck, but the kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity and habit. They drove to a restaurant in downtown Tempe, one of those trendy brunch places with reclaimed wood and overpriced avocado toast. I followed at a distance, parking where I could see them through the window. More photos. Them holding hands across the table, feeding each other bites of food, Melissa throwing her head back in laughter at something he said. She looked happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. That hurt worse than anything. I beat her home by an hour. The kids were still at Mom's. I told her I needed the evening. She'd agreed without questions. When Melissa walked in at 6:15, I was sitting in the living room with a manila folder on the coffee table. Hey, she set her purse down, her cheeks still flushed. How was movie day? We need to talk. Something in my voice made her freeze. About what? Sit down, Melissa. David, you're scaring me. Sit down. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped in her lap. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, the forensic audit summary. What is this? She asked. My father's inheritance came with a condition, a complete financial audit of our household for the past 5 years. I slid the paper across to her. Guess what they found? The color drained from her face as she scanned the page. $127,000, I continued. Withdrawn in small amounts over 5 years. Used to fund an apartment in Tempe. 2847 South Mill Avenue, Unit 218. Sound familiar? David, I'm not finished. I pulled out the next document. Tyler Kowalski, personal trainer at Elite Fitness. Your boyfriend of 6 years, give or take. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Still not finished. The DNA results came out next, all 3 of them. Emma's mine. Jacob isn't. Sophie isn't. Did you even know? Or were you just hoping I'd never find out? Tears started streaming down her face. Please, let me explain. Explain what? My voice cracked. Explain how you stole over $100,000 from our family. Explain how you've been living a double life for 6 years. Explain how 2 of the children I've raised aren't actually mine. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Melissa? Help me understand. She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. I met Tyler at the gym. We were just friends at first, but then you decided to have his children while I paid the bills. I love them. I love all of them. But you don't love me. It wasn't a question. She looked at me, mascara running down her cheeks, and said nothing. The silence was answer enough. I stood up. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. You can stay here tonight, but tomorrow you need to find somewhere else to live. The kids are staying with me. You can't. I can. I have documentation of financial fraud, adultery, and DNA evidence that 2 of the children you claimed were mine aren't. Any judge in Arizona will give me primary custody. David, please. I also have photos from today. You and Tyler at the apartment, at the restaurant. Very cozy. Her face went white. You followed me? You stole from me for 6 years. You lied to me for 6 years. You let me raise another man's children while you played house with your boyfriend. So yes, Melissa. I followed you. I walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Your mother never called you today, did she? She shook her head. I know. I called her yesterday to tell her everything. She's expecting you tomorrow. I'd get there early. You're going to need a place to stay. I left her crying on the couch and drove back to my mother's house to pick up the kids. Emma asked why I looked upset. I told her everything was fine, we'd talk about it later. But nothing was fine. And I had no idea how to explain to them that their family had just imploded. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and furniture polish. I sat across from Patricia Valdez, divorce attorney, while she reviewed the folder I'd brought. Printouts of bank statements, text message logs, photographs of Melissa and Tyler entering the Tempe apartment, and 3 DNA test results that felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds each. Walk me through the timeline again, Patricia said, her pen poised over a legal pad. She was maybe 50, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. When did you first discover the affair? 4 days ago. The forensic audit my father's estate required. That's what uncovered the money trail. Everything else followed from there. She nodded, making notes. And you haven't told your wife you've obtained paternity tests? No. She knows I'm filing for divorce. She knows I have evidence of the affair. But the DNA results? I swallowed hard. I haven't figured out how to say those words out loud yet. Patricia set down her pen and looked at me directly. Mr. Brennan, I need you to understand something. Arizona is a no-fault divorce state. The affair, while emotionally devastating, won't significantly impact the divorce settlement itself. However, the paternity issue changes everything regarding custody and child support. Explain. Jacob is 9, Sophie is 6. You're listed as the father on both birth certificates. Under Arizona law, you're their legal father regardless of biology. You've acted as their parent for their entire lives. That establishes you as the presumptive father. My stomach twisted. What does that mean practically? It means you have the same rights and responsibilities as if they were biologically yours. You can seek custody, but you'll also likely owe child support if she gets primary placement. She paused. However, we can use the paternity evidence to argue that your wife committed fraud during the marriage. That might influence how the court views spousal maintenance and division of assets. The inheritance, I said. My father's money. That's separate property, right? Inherited assets received during a marriage are generally separate property in Arizona, yes. As long as you keep those funds segregated and don't commingle them with marital assets, your wife has no claim to them. Patricia flipped through her notes. The $127,000 she withdrew from your joint accounts over 5 years, will absolutely pursue that. She used marital funds to support an affair and maintain a secret residence. The court will consider that dissipation of marital assets. I thought about the Tempe apartment, about Melissa spending our money, my salary, the money I earned working 60-hour weeks, to build a separate life with another man. Can we get it back? We can argue she should reimburse the marital estate for those funds. Whether the judge orders full reimbursement depends on how the overall asset division shakes out. She made another note. Tell me about your current living situation. We own a house in Scottsdale. Bought it 8 years ago for $425,000, currently worth around $580,000. Mortgage balance is $290,000. We have about $85,000 in retirement accounts, split between my 401k and her IRA from before she stopped working. 2 cars. Mine's paid off. Hers has $12,000 left on the loan. Joint checking account has maybe $8,000 in it right now. Patricia did quick math on her pad. So roughly $375,000 in marital assets, not counting the money she withdrew. With 3 children involved, the court's primary concern will be their welfare and stability. Your wife hasn't worked outside the home in how long? 12 years, since Emma was born. She'll argue she needs spousal maintenance to get back on her feet. The court will likely agree to some level of support, at least temporarily, given the length of the marriage and her absence from the workforce. She looked up at me. I know that's not what you want to hear. I don't want to give her a dime. The words came out harder than I intended. She destroyed our family. She lied to me for 6 years. 2 of the children I've been supporting aren't even mine. I understand. But Arizona law doesn't punish spouses for adultery through financial penalties. The best we can do is use the affair and the paternity fraud to build a narrative that influences the judge's discretion on the margins. Patricia tapped her pen against the pad. Here's what I recommend. We file immediately for dissolution of marriage. We request temporary orders establishing a parenting time schedule and maintaining the status quo on finances until trial. We conduct discovery to nail down every detail of her affair. When it started, how much money she spent, whether Tyler Kowalski contributed to the apartment costs. And we decide how you want to handle the paternity issue regarding custody. What do you mean, decide? You have options. You can seek full custody of all 3 children, arguing that her affair and deception demonstrate poor judgment and character. You can seek custody of Emma only, since she's biologically yours, and let your wife have primary placement of Jacob and Sophie. Or you can seek shared placement of all 3. She leaned forward. What do you want, Mr. Brennan? The question hit me like a punch to the chest. What did I want? I'd spent the last 4 days in a fog of rage and betrayal, focused on gathering evidence and making Melissa pay for what she'd done. But Patricia was asking me to look past the anger and think about the actual lives involved. Jacob and Sophie weren't my biological children. Melissa had lied about that for years. But I'd been there when they were born. I'd walked the floor with them at 2 a.m. when they were crying. I'd taught Jacob to ride a bike and helped Sophie learn to read. They called me Dad. They ran to me when they got hurt. They didn't know yet that their entire understanding of their family was built on a lie. I want custody of all 3, I heard myself say. I'm the only father they've known. I'm not going to abandon them because of what Melissa did. Patricia nodded slowly. That's admirable. It's also going to be expensive. You'll be paying child support for 2 children who aren't biologically yours. I don't care about the money. You should care. Child support in Arizona is calculated based on income and parenting time. You make $140,000 a year. Your wife makes nothing. Even if we get you equal parenting time, you'll owe her roughly $1,800 a month for 3 children. If she gets primary placement, it could be $2,500 or more. She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. Plus spousal maintenance. Given the length of the marriage, she could receive support for 5 to 7 years. maybe $2,000 a month. You're looking at $4,000 to $4,500 a month in combined support payments. $50,000 a year. To support the woman who'd betrayed me and the children she'd had with another man. The inheritance money suddenly felt less like freedom and more like a trap. Enough money to make me comfortable enough to be generous, to take the high road, to keep supporting a family that wasn't actually mine. What if we pushed for primary custody? I asked. What would that take? Evidence that placement with her would be detrimental to the children's welfare. The affair alone won't do it. Courts don't generally consider adultery relevant to parenting ability unless it directly impacted the children. Did she bring Tyler around them? Neglect them while she was at the apartment? I thought back through the text messages the forensic accountant had pulled. Melissa usually met Tyler on weekday mornings, after I left for work and the kids were at school. Some afternoon meetings, but those were less frequent. I don't think so. She was careful. Then we'd need something else. Substance abuse, mental health issues, evidence of poor supervision or care. Do you have anything like that? No. Melissa had always been a good mother, at least in the ways I could observe. The kids were fed, clothed, taken to their activities. She volunteered in their classrooms. She made their lunches and helped with homework and threw elaborate birthday parties. She'd just also been sleeping with her personal trainer and lying about the paternity of 2 of them for years. Without stronger evidence, you're looking at shared custody, Patricia said. Which, frankly, is probably the best outcome for the children anyway. They need both parents, Mr. Brennan. Even if one of those parents made terrible choices. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that Melissa didn't deserve to be anyone's parent, that she'd forfeited that right when she decided to destroy our family. But Patricia was right. Emma, Jacob, and Sophie didn't deserve to lose their mother because of what she'd done to me. How long will this take? I asked. If she contests it, 12 to 18 months from filing to final judgment. If we can negotiate a settlement, maybe 6 to 9 months. She pulled out a retainer agreement. My fee is $350 an hour. I'll need a $15,000 retainer to start. Given the complexity, the paternity issues, the financial fraud, 3 minor children, you should budget $40,000 to $60,000 in total legal fees if this goes to trial. I signed the agreement without hesitation. I had $3.2 million sitting in an estate account. I could afford the best representation available. One more thing, Patricia said as I stood to leave. You need to tell your wife about the paternity test before we file. She deserves to know what's coming, and it's better if she hears it from you than reads it in a court petition. The thought of facing Melissa again made my chest tight. When? Soon, this week. Once we file, everything becomes adversarial. Right now, you still have a chance to handle this with some dignity. Dignity. I almost laughed. There was nothing dignified about any of this. The printout felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my pocket as I walked through the automatic doors of the Coral Gables Medical Center. I wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't even sure what I was doing here, but the email from my father's estate lawyer had been specific. Final medical records transfer required my signature before the inheritance could be fully processed. Bureaucratic nonsense, probably. But I'd learned to follow every thread. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. I approached the reception desk where a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain looked up from her computer. David Brennan, I have an appointment to sign some records release forms. She clicked through her screen. Right. Estate matter. Give me just a moment. I stood there, checking my phone out of habit. 3 missed calls from Melissa. I'd moved into a furnished rental in Brickell 2 weeks ago, and she'd been calling constantly, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry. I'd stopped answering after the first few conversations went nowhere. Mr. Brennan? A different voice. I looked up to see a nurse in blue scrubs holding a manila folder. I can help you with those forms. Follow me. We walked down a corridor lined with examination rooms. She led me to a small office and gestured to a chair. "This should just take a few minutes," she said, opening the folder. "We need your signature authorizing the transfer of your father's medical records to the estate executor. Standard procedure." I signed where she indicated. She gathered the papers, then paused, looking at something else in the folder. "Oh, and we have some lab results that came in. For Melissa Brennan?" She glanced at me. "Your wife, correct? Same address on file?" My stomach tightened. "What kind of results?" "Let me just—" She pulled out another sheet, scanning it. Then her expression shifted slightly. Professional mask slipping for just a second. This should probably be discussed with her directly. There's a note here about paternity concerns and some follow-up STD screening that was ordered after a... She caught herself, looking up at me. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that out loud. Patient privacy." The room felt smaller. Paternity concerns? She was already backtracking, her face flushing. "I really can't discuss another patient's results, even if you're married." "I apologize. That was unprofessional of me." "When did she come in for this test?" The nurse hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the damage already done. "I've already said too much. You should speak with your wife." But she'd left the folder open on the desk. When she turned to file my father's paperwork, I could see the header on Melissa's lab report. The date, 2 weeks ago. The ordering physician, Dr. Amanda Foster, and in the notes section, partially visible, patient requests private consultation RE, exposure timeline, and paternity determination for youngest child. Youngest child. Sophie. "I'll need a copy of those results," I said. The nurse turned back, shaking her head firmly. "I can't release them to you without her consent. I shouldn't have even mentioned them. Please, just talk to your wife." "She's not living at that address anymore," I said. It wasn't quite true. I was the one who'd moved out, but the nurse didn't need to know that. "And she's been having mail forwarded through me. If there's a medical concern, the results can be accessed through her patient portal. She'll receive a notification." The nurse was closing the folder now, professional walls back up. "I really am sorry for the confusion." I left the office with my father's paperwork and a sick feeling in my gut. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and called Robert Walsh. "I need you to check something," I said when he answered. "Melissa's medical records. Is there any way to access them through the audit trail?" "Not legally," Robert said. "Medical records are protected." "Why?" I told him what the nurse had said. The paternity concerns, the STD screening, the exposure timeline. Robert was quiet for a moment. "When did you say this test was done?" 2 weeks ago, after I'd already moved out." "So she's getting tested now, after you confronted her about the affair." He paused. "David, this might not be what you think. She might just be covering her bases, making sure Tyler didn't give her anything." The nurse mentioned paternity determination for Sophie specifically. "Could be she's confirming what she already knows, or finding out for sure." Robert's voice was careful. "But there's another possibility. What if there was someone else? Not just Tyler?" The thought hadn't occurred to me. I'd been so focused on Tyler, on the apartment, on the 6-year timeline. But what if the betrayal went deeper? "I need to see those results," I said. "You won't get them through official channels, but—" Robert trailed off. "Look, I'm not suggesting anything illegal, but if she's still using your shared insurance, the EOB statements go to the primary policyholder. That's you. Explanation of benefits. The insurance summaries that showed what procedures were done and where. They wouldn't include actual test results, but they'd show what was ordered." "I'll check," I said. The EOB was waiting in my email when I got back to the rental. Coral Gables Medical Center. Date of service 14 days ago. Procedure codes for comprehensive STD panel and genetic paternity testing. Total billed $847. Insurance covered $623. I stared at the screen. She'd gone in for testing after I'd already confronted her, after I'd already filed for divorce. Why? My phone buzzed. Melissa calling again. This time I answered. David, please, we need to talk. When were you going to tell me about the paternity test? I said. Silence. Then, how did you know about that? Doesn't matter. What matters is why you're getting tested now. After everything. I needed to know for sure. Her voice was small. About Sophie. You didn't know? The question came out sharper than I intended. 6 years, Melissa. You've been sleeping with Tyler for 6 years, and you don't know if Sophie is his? It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Make it simple. Another pause. There was a period right before I got pregnant with Sophie when Tyler and I had broken up for a few months. We'd had a fight about... It doesn't matter. We weren't together. And you and I were still having sex, I finished. You were still sleeping with me while you were sleeping with him. We were married, David. We had a life together. I never stopped. She caught herself. I know how this sounds, but I genuinely didn't know for sure about Sophie. I thought she might be yours. I hoped she was. The words hit like physical blows. And Jacob? Jacob is Tyler's. No hesitation this time. I knew that from the beginning. The timing was... There was no question. I pulled over to the shoulder of the road, my hands shaking too badly to drive. You've known for 9 years that Jacob isn't mine, and you never said anything. I couldn't. Don't you see? If I told you about Jacob, I'd have to tell you about Tyler, and I'd lose everything. I'd lose you and the kids and our life. You didn't lose it, I said. You threw it away. You threw it away every single day for 6 years while you looked me in the eye and lied. I'm sorry. And the STD test? Were you worried Tyler gave you something, or was there someone else? The silence stretched too long. Melissa. Was there someone else? Once, she whispered. Just once. About 3 months ago. Someone I met at the gym. It didn't mean anything. I ended the call. Sat there on the shoulder of Route 1 with cars rushing past, the phone still in my hand. Not just Tyler. Not just 6 years. Someone else. Someone recent. The medical printout was still in my pocket. I pulled it out, unfolding it carefully. The header showed Melissa's name, date of birth, patient ID number. The test results themselves were coded, but the consultation notes were in plain English. Patient reports potential exposure to STI through extramarital partner. Requests full screening panel and paternity determination for minor child. DOB 2018. Patient expresses uncertainty regarding biological father due to overlapping relationships during conception window. Overlapping relationships. Clinical language for sleeping with multiple men while married. I took a photo of the printout with my phone. Then I started the car and drove. The printout sat in my hand like a live grenade. I'd gone to pick up my own blood work, routine cholesterol screening my doctor ordered after I mentioned stress headaches, and walked into a perfect storm of medical incompetence. The nurse at the front desk, new apparently, had pulled up Melissa's recent results when I gave our address. Before the other staff member could stop her, she'd started reading aloud. Mrs. Brennan, your STD panel came back, and we need to discuss the timeline you mentioned regarding potential exposure. Also, the paternity test for Sophie shows... The older nurse had practically lunged across the counter, snatching the papers away. That's not... Mr. Brennan, I'm so sorry there's been a terrible mix-up with the records. But I'd already seen enough. The header on the printout clearly visible. Melissa Brennan, confidential consult notes, STD screening post-exposure. I need a copy of that, I said quietly. Sir, we can't release another patient's... My wife, who I'm currently divorcing, who apparently needed an STD test recently. I leaned forward. And paternity testing. For my daughter. The silence stretched between us like taffy. Finally, the older nurse, her badge read, Sandra Mills, gestured to a side office. Give me a moment. She returned 5 minutes later with a heavily redacted printout, but enough remained visible to paint the picture. Melissa had come in 2 weeks ago, 3 days after our confrontation at the Tempe apartment, requesting emergency STD screening. The consult notes mentioned multiple partners, uncertain exposure timeline, patient concerned about transmission. Multiple partners. The paternity test for Sophie had been ordered the same day. Results pending. I drove home on autopilot, the printout burning a hole in my passenger seat. Patricia Valdez had advised me to stay at a hotel during the separation, but I'd refused to leave my house. Instead, Melissa had moved into the guest bedroom. We existed in cold silence, passing each other in hallways like strangers, communicating only through terse texts about the kids' schedules. She was in the kitchen when I got home, making Emma's lunch for school the next day. The domestic normalcy of it, her cutting sandwiches into triangles the way she always did, made my vision blur red. Car, now. I held up the printout. Her face went white. David, I can explain. Car, now. We walked outside in silence. The kids were at their grandmother's for the afternoon. Melissa's mother had been taking them more often lately, sensing the tension without knowing its source. I got behind the wheel, Melissa sliding into the passenger seat, and pulled out of the driveway. I made it 2 blocks before I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the wheel right, pulling onto the shoulder of Camelback Road with enough force that Melissa grabbed the dashboard. What the hell are you? I shoved the printout at her face. STD screening, multiple partners. You want to tell me what uncertain exposure timeline means? She stared at the paper, her hands shaking. That's private medical information. They had no right. Answer the goddamn question, Melissa. A car honked as it passed us, the driver gesturing angrily. We were half on the shoulder, half in the bike lane, my hazards blinking uselessly. I told you about the guy at the gym, she whispered. 3 months ago, just once. I got scared, okay? I needed to make sure I hadn't caught anything. And the paternity test? For Sophie? She closed her eyes. I needed to know for sure. You were going to find out anyway with your test, so I thought... You thought you'd get ahead of it? Control the narrative? I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't sound like me. You've known for 9 years that Jacob isn't mine. 9 years, Melissa. And you still don't know about Sophie? Tyler and I broke up for 6 weeks. Her voice rose, defensive. Right before she was conceived. I thought she was yours. I really did. But then when you did those tests, and she came back as not yours, I started thinking about the timing, and maybe I got it wrong. Maybe Tyler and I had gotten back together earlier than I remembered. Stop. I pressed my palms against my eyes. Just stop talking. David, please. How many, Melissa? How many men? She went very still. What? The consult notes say multiple partners. Tyler, the gym guy. Who else? That's it. Just them. The nurse must have meant, don't lie to me. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel, and she flinched. You don't get to lie anymore, not about this, not about anything. We sat there, cars whooshing past, the afternoon sun beating down through the windshield. Finally, she spoke, her voice so small I almost didn't hear it. There was someone else, before Tyler, when Emma was 2. The world tilted sideways. His name was Derek. Derek Phillips. He was a contractor working on the Johnson's pool next door. It lasted maybe 3 months. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I ended it. I swore I'd never do it again. And then I met Tyler, and 12 years. My voice sounded hollow. You've been cheating on me for 12 years. Not continuously. Derek was only, "Get out of the car." "David, get out of my car." She fumbled with the door handle, nearly falling onto the shoulder in her haste. I pulled back into traffic before she'd fully closed the door, watching her shrink in my rearview mirror, standing on the side of Camelback Road with her arms wrapped around herself. I drove without direction, ending up in a strip mall parking lot 15 minutes later. My hands were shaking too hard to hold the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and stared at the printout photo I'd taken. Melissa Brennan, confidential consult notes, STD screening post-exposure. The clinic's name was printed at the top, Sonoran Medical Partners. Below that, the doctor's name, Dr. Rachel Foster, and in the corner, part of a larger network logo, Southwest Family Medicine Network. An idea formed, terrible and perfect. I opened my laptop. I'd been keeping it in my car lately, not trusting Melissa with access to anything, and created a new email account. concernedparty2124@gmail.com. Anonymous. Untraceable. Then I spent 20 minutes searching physician directories, medical board listings, professional networks. Southwest Family Medicine Network had 43 doctors across the Phoenix metro area. I found email addresses for 37 of them. The email I composed was simple. Subject: Patient safety concern. Melissa Brennan. To whom it may concern. I am writing to alert you to a patient safety issue involving Melissa Brennan, DOB 7/14, 1985. Recent testing has revealed concerning patterns of behavior, including multiple, undisclosed partners and potential disease exposure. Attached documentation from Sonoran Medical Partners indicates ongoing risk factors that may be relevant to her care across your network. This information is provided in the interest of patient and public health. I attach the printout scan, redacted just enough to avoid obvious HIPAA violations but leaving the damning details visible. Then I hovered my cursor over the send button. This would destroy her. Medical professionals talked. They gossiped. Within a week, every doctor in the network would know Melissa Brennan's name, would whisper about the woman with multiple affairs who needed emergency STD screening. She'd never be able to show her face at a doctor's office in Phoenix again without judgment. It was cruel, disproportionate, possibly illegal. I clicked send. The emails whooshed out into the void, 37 digital missiles aimed at what remained of Melissa's reputation. I sat there watching the sent folder, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no remorse, just a vast, empty numbness. Then I drove to a FedEx office and printed 50 color copies of the medical printout. I stopped at a hardware store and bought the strongest super glue they sold, industrial strength, the kind that warns about bonding skin in seconds. The billboard was on Interstate 10, just before the Tempe exit. I'd passed it 1,000 times. A giant advertisement for DNA diagnostics, showing a smiling family with the tagline, "Know the truth. Paternity testing you can trust." It took me until 2 a.m., working in the dark with a ladder I'd borrowed from my garage. I superglued Melissa's clinic card. I'd stolen it from her wallet weeks ago, right in the center of the billboard, positioned perfectly between the father's face and the child's. Around it, I glued copies of the medical printout, creating a grotesque wreath of evidence. The superglue worked exactly as advertised. Those documents weren't coming off without industrial solvents and a lot of effort. I stood back, surveying my work in the glow of the interstate lights. Thousands of people would drive past this tomorrow. Some would look closely enough to read the name, to see the details. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Valdez. Need to meet tomorrow. Melissa's attorney filed motion to expedite custody hearing. Call me first thing. I drove home as dawn broke over the Phoenix skyline, the city waking up to another scorching day. Melissa's car wasn't in the driveway, probably still at her mother's, or maybe she'd gone to Tyler's. I didn't care anymore. Inside the house felt like a museum of a life that never really existed. Emma's artwork on the fridge, Jacob's soccer trophies, Sophie's toy kitchen in the corner. My phone buzzed again. An email notification. The subject line made my blood run cold. Patient safety concern, Melissa Brennan. Dr. Rachel Foster had replied. Mr. Brennan, I know who you are. What you've done is a federal HIPAA violation and harassment. I've forwarded this to our legal department and the medical board. Expect consequences. Also, you might want to check Sophie's actual results before you destroy your wife completely. They came in this morning. My hands shook as I opened the attachment. Paternity test results. Sophie Brennan. Alleged father. David Brennan. Probability of paternity. 99.97%. Sophie was mine. The phone rang at 6:47 a.m. I'd been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and the printout from Dr. Foster still in my hand. Sophie is biologically his. 97% probability. I'd spent the night replaying every moment since I glued those medical records to the billboard on Route 60. 37 emails to Melissa's entire medical network. HIPAA violations that could carry criminal penalties. And for what? Because I'd been so certain, so absolutely convinced that Sophie wasn't mine. The phone kept ringing. Miami area code. Mr. Brennan, this is Detective Lisa Moreno with Miami-Dade Police Department. I need you to come down to the station this morning to discuss a complaint we've received. My stomach dropped. What kind of complaint? Unauthorized distribution of protected medical information, harassment, and vandalism. Can you be here by 9? I looked at the clock. 3 hours to figure out what the hell I was going to say. I'll be there. She gave me the address and hung up. No pleasantries, no explanation of my rights. Just the cold efficiency of someone who'd made this call 1,000 times before. I called Patricia Valdez. She answered on the second ring, sounding irritatingly alert for this hour. David, I was expecting your call. The police want to see me at 9. I know. Melissa filed a restraining order yesterday afternoon. Judge signed it at 4:30. You're not supposed to be within 500 feet of her, the house, or the children's schools. The words hit me like a physical blow. She can't. I live here. My kids are here. You lived there. Past tense. The temporary order gives her exclusive use of the marital residence pending the hearing. You need to collect essentials and find somewhere else to stay. And David? Her voice sharpened. Tell me you didn't actually email her medical records to 36 doctors. I said nothing. Jesus Christ, do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just divorce court anymore. This is criminal territory. I'm a family law attorney, not a criminal defense lawyer. Can you recommend someone? I'll make some calls. But right now, you need to understand something. Everything you've done in the last 48 hours has handed Melissa the narrative. You're not the wronged husband anymore. You're the unstable ex who violated his wife's medical privacy and plastered her private health information on a public billboard. She had affairs for 12 years. She spent my inheritance money on. None of that matters if you're in jail, David. None of it matters if a judge decides you're a danger to your family. You think you were protecting yourself? You just gave her every weapon she needs to destroy you in court. I closed my eyes. The printout from Dr. Foster crinkled in my grip. Sophie's mine. The test came back. She's biologically mine. Silence on the other end. Then, when did you find this out? Last night, Dr. Foster emailed me around 11. Before or after the billboard? After. More silence. So you committed multiple felonies based on incomplete information, and now you've discovered that one of your primary justifications was wrong. I didn't know. That's not a defense, David. That's the problem. She sighed. Listen to me very carefully. When you go to the police station, you say nothing without a criminal attorney present. Nothing. Not good morning, Not nice weather, nothing substantive. You understand? Yes. I'll have someone meet you there. His name is James Garrett. He's expensive, but he's good. And David, stop doing things. Stop investigating. Stop following Melissa. Stop making decisions when you're angry. Everything you do from this point forward is evidence. She hung up. I sat there for another 10 minutes, then went upstairs to pack a bag. The house was silent. Melissa had taken the kids to her mother's place in Coral Gables 2 days ago, right after I'd confronted her about the medical records. I hadn't seen them since. My phone buzzed. Text from a number I didn't recognize. This is James Garrett. Patricia Valdez referred you. I'll meet you at Miami-Dade Central Station at 8:45. Do not speak to anyone before I arrive. Do not answer questions. Do not try to explain yourself. Acknowledge receipt of this message. I typed back, understood. Another buzz. This time from Robert Walsh, the forensic accountant. Need to talk. Found something in the audit you should see. Call me. I almost laughed. Of course there was more. There was always more. I called him back. David, thanks for getting back to me so quickly. He sounded uncomfortable. Listen, I've been going through the credit card statements more thoroughly, cross-referencing with the bank records, and I found some transactions that don't match the affair timeline. What do you mean? The apartment in Tempe. Melissa paid the deposit and first month's rent 6 years ago, right? March 2018. Right. But there are hotel charges going back further. Different hotels, different parts of Phoenix, the Biltmore, the Phoenician, the Camback Inn, all charged to a credit card in her name that wasn't in the original audit scope because it was paid off every month from a separate checking account. My head was spinning. How far back? 14 years. The first charge is from June 2010, 3 months after you got married. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was saying. David, you still there? 14 years. I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you want to hear right now, but you asked for a complete picture. This is part of it. He paused. There's something else. Some of the charges are for 2 rooms. Same hotel, same nights, adjoining rooms. And there are airline tickets, round trips to Miami, to Atlanta, to Denver, all paid from that same account. Where was the money coming from? That's the thing. It wasn't coming from your accounts. This was a separate income stream. I traced it back to a business entity registered in her name, an LLC called Red Point Consulting, established in 2009. Melissa doesn't work. She hasn't worked since Emma was born. According to the tax returns I found, Red Point Consulting has been generating between $30,000 and $60,000 a year since 2010. It's listed as marketing consulting services. I felt like the floor was tilting. What kind of consulting? I don't know yet. The client list isn't in the records I have access to. But someone's been paying her, David, consistently, for 14 years. I looked at the clock. 7:23. I had an hour and 20 minutes before I had to be at the police station to potentially be arrested for crimes I'd committed in a rage over a wife who'd apparently been lying about everything since before we even got married. Send me what you have, I said. David, I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. You're already in legal trouble. If you do something with this information, send it. He hesitated. Okay, but please talk to your attorney before you do anything. Please. I hung up and stared at my phone. 14 years. A secret business. Income she'd never disclosed. Hotel rooms and plane tickets, and a life I knew nothing about. The DNA result sat next to Dr. Foster's email. Emma was mine. Jacob wasn't. Sophie was. A family built on lies and genetic roulette, and I'd just blown up what was left of it by plastering my wife's medical records on a billboard because I couldn't control my anger for 48 hours. My phone buzzed again. Email from Robert with attachments, bank statements, tax returns, credit card records going back to 2009. I opened the first file. Red Point Consulting, LLC. Principal, Melissa Ann Brennan. Business address, a P.O. Box in Scottsdale. Registered agent, a law firm I didn't recognize. The tax return showed $47,000 in revenue for 2023. Expenses listed as travel, meals, professional development. Net income, $31,000. I scrolled through the credit card statements. The Phoenician, February 2024. 2 rooms, 3 nights. Total, $2,147. The Biltmore, November 2023. 2 rooms, 2 nights. Total, $1,654. And then I saw it. A charge from March 15th, 2024. The day my father died. While I was at the hospital watching him take his last breath, Melissa had checked into the Cam back in. 1 room this time. Room service for 2. Champagne. I stared at the date until the numbers blurred. She'd been celebrating. The police station interview room smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. James Garrett sat beside me, expensive suit and calm demeanor, while Detective Moreno laid out printed copies of the emails I'd sent, photographs of the billboard, and a formal complaint from Melissa's attorney citing harassment, HIPAA violations, and emotional distress. "My client has nothing to say at this time," Garrett said before I could open my mouth. Moreno looked at me with something like pity. "Mr. Brennan, you're facing serious charges here. Federal healthcare privacy violations carry up to 10 years and $250,000 in fines. The harassment charges are state level, but combined with the restraining order violation." "What restraining order violation?" Garrett interrupted. "Your client was served notice yesterday at 4:30 p.m. to vacate the marital residence. Neighbors reported his car in the driveway at 11:47 p.m. I'd gone back to get my laptop. 15 minutes, in and out. I hadn't even seen Melissa." Garrett made a note. "We'll address that separately. For now, detective, unless you're charging my client, we're done here." Moreno slid a business card across the table. "The DA's office will be in touch. Don't leave Miami-Dade County." Outside in the parking lot, Garrett turned to me. "You're lucky they didn't arrest you on the spot. The only reason they didn't is because Melissa's attorney is pushing for a plea deal. She doesn't want this going to trial any more than you do." "What kind of deal?" "Probably probation, mandatory counseling, a substantial fine, and an agreement to stay away from her permanently. You'd plead to misdemeanor harassment, and the federal charges would be dropped." He paused. "You'd also likely lose any chance at custody of the children." The words hit like a physical blow. Emma, Jacob, Sophie. My kids, or at least the kids I'd raised as mine. There has to be another way. "There isn't, not after what you did." Garrett's expression was stern. "You committed crimes, Mr. Brennan. Crimes motivated by anger and revenge. No judge is going to look at that and think you're a stable parental figure." I drove to a motel near the airport, paid cash for a week, and sat on the stained bedspread staring at Robert Walsh's files on my laptop. 14 years of secret income. Hotel rooms, plane tickets. A business I knew nothing about. I should have stopped. Should have listened to Patricia, to Garrett, to everyone telling me to stand down. But I couldn't. Not when the truth was right there, buried in spreadsheets and credit card statements. I spent 3 days cross-referencing everything. The hotel charges matched dates when Melissa had claimed to be visiting her sister in Atlanta or attending a friend's wedding in Denver. The airline tickets corresponded with weekends she'd said she needed alone time or was going to spa retreats. But it was the business clients that broke everything open. Red Point Consulting had only 3 clients over 14 years. 3 companies, all with the same billing address. All owned by the same parent corporation. Tyler Kowalski's family business. His father owned a chain of fitness centers across the Southwest. Tyler wasn't just a personal trainer. He was the heir to a multi-million-dollar empire. And Melissa had been consulting for his family's company since 2009, the year before we got married. She'd known him before we were married, before Emma, before everything. Our entire marriage had been built on a foundation that didn't exist. I called Robert Walsh. I need you to dig deeper into Tyler Kowalski, his family, his business, everything. David, I can't keep doing this. You're already in legal trouble. Please, just this one last thing. He sighed. I'll see what I can find. The call came 2 days later. You need to sit down for this, Robert said. I was already sitting, but I braced myself anyway. Tyler Kowalski's father, Richard Kowalski, died in 2019. Left everything to Tyler, the business, real estate holdings, investment accounts. Total estate value around $18 million. He paused. Tyler got married 6 months ago to a woman named Jennifer Reeves. They're expecting their first child in November. The room spun. Melissa knew, I said. She knew he got married. It was in the Phoenix Business Journal. Big society wedding. There's no way she didn't know. Robert's voice was gentle. David, I think Melissa was never going to end up with Tyler. I think she was using him for money and excitement, but she always planned to stay with you. You were the stable one, the provider, the father to her children. And Tyler? Tyler was the escape, the fantasy, but he was always going to marry someone from his own world eventually. Robert paused. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make any of this better. I hung up and stared at the motel ceiling. Melissa had played both of us. Tyler had probably known about me the whole time, had his fun with a married woman while building his real life with someone else. And I'd been the fool paying the bills, raising children who might or might not be mine, believing in a marriage that was never real. The preliminary hearing was set for October 15th. Patricia Valdez met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse to go over the custody situation. Melissa's attorney is offering a settlement, she said. She gets primary custody of all 3 children. You get supervised visitation twice a month. You pay child support of $2,800 monthly, plus half of all medical and educational expenses. You also agree to drop any claims to reimbursement for the money she spent on the apartment. And if I don't agree? Then we go to trial, and a judge hears about how you violated your wife's medical privacy, plastered her health information on a public billboard, and violated a restraining order. You'll lose, David, and you'll probably lose worse than this settlement. I thought about Emma, who'd been crying every time I called. About Jacob, who didn't understand why Daddy couldn't come home. About Sophie, who was too young to understand any of it. What about the business? I asked. Red Point Consulting, the income she never disclosed. Patricia shook her head. You can bring it up, but it won't change the custody outcome. It might affect the financial settlement, but you've already said you don't care about the money. She was right. The inheritance sat untouched in an estate account. $3.2 million that was supposed to be my father's final gift, but felt more like a curse. If he hadn't required that audit, I might have lived the rest of my life never knowing the truth. Would that have been better? I genuinely didn't know. I'll take the settlement, I said. Patricia looked relieved. I think that's the right choice. For what it's worth, David, you can rebuild from this. It'll take time, but you can have a relationship with your kids again. You can move forward. But I wasn't sure I believed her. The divorce was finalized on December 3rd, 2024. I signed the papers in Patricia's office, my hand steady, despite the weight of what I was agreeing to. Melissa signed remotely, through her attorney. We didn't have to see each other. The criminal charges were resolved through a plea agreement. 1 year probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management counseling, and a $50,000 fine paid to a healthcare privacy advocacy organization. The federal charges were dropped. I moved to Tampa, far enough from Miami to start over, but close enough to make the twice-monthly visits to see the kids. I took a new job with a tech company, same kind of work, slightly less pay. I rented a small apartment near the water. The first supervised visitation was at a family center in Coral Gables, a cheerful room with toys and games and a social worker watching everything. Emma was polite but distant. Jacob was confused, kept asking when I was coming home. Sophie didn't really remember me. 6 months was a lifetime at her age. I read them stories and played games and pretended everything was normal, while my heart broke into smaller and smaller pieces. By the sixth visit, Emma started talking to me again. Really talking, not just polite answers. She told me about school, about her friends, about how mom seemed sad all the time now. She didn't ask about the divorce. She was 12, old enough to know that some questions didn't have good answers. Jacob warmed up slower, but eventually he started bringing his soccer ball, wanting me to practice with him in the center's small courtyard. Sophie remained a mystery, friendly but treating me like a distant relative rather than her father. I didn't tell them about the DNA tests. Maybe someday when they were older they'd have a right to know. But for now, it didn't matter. Biology hadn't made me their father. Time and presence had. And I'd lost that presence through my own actions. Tyler Kowalski's wife had their baby in November. I knew because Emma mentioned it. Apparently Melissa had told her that an old friend had become a father. The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. I never found out if Melissa told Tyler about Jacob and Sophie. I never found out if he cared. He'd moved on to his real life, and we were just the wreckage left behind. On Christmas Eve, I sat in my Tampa apartment with a small tree, and no one to share it with. The kids were with Melissa, as specified in the custody agreement. I'd see them on the 27th for a supervised visit, 3 hours where we'd exchange gifts and pretend the holiday hadn't already happened without me. My phone rang. Patricia Valdez. Merry Christmas, David. I wanted to let you know. Melissa's attorney reached out about modifying the custody arrangement. My heart jumped. She wants to reduce my time? No, she wants to increase it. Unsupervised visits, alternating weekends, shared holidays. She says the kids are asking for more time with you. I couldn't speak. David, this is good news. Why? I finally managed. Why would she agree to that? Patricia was quiet for a moment. I think she's tired. I think the guilt is catching up with her. And I think she sees that you're trying, really trying, to be better. The counseling, the community service, the way you show up for every visit even when it's hard, that matters. After we hung up, I sat there in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, thinking about my father. He'd known something was wrong. Somehow, he'd sensed it, had arranged for that audit even while dying of cancer. He'd tried to protect me the only way he knew how. The inheritance sat in my account, mostly untouched except for legal fees. I'd thought about giving it away, donating it to charity, anything to be free of the weight of it. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was that the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. I'd lost my marriage. I'd damaged my relationship with my children. I'd committed crimes I'd have to live with for the rest of my life. But I knew the truth now. I knew exactly what my life had been, and I could build something real going forward. The anger that had driven me to that billboard, to those emails, had burned itself out. What remained was something quieter but more durable. A determination to be the father my children needed, even if I only got them twice a month. Even if 2 of them didn't share my DNA. Even if the family I'd believed in had never really existed. Emma called me on Christmas morning. Just a quick call, saying she missed me, asking if I'd like the drawing she'd made for me. I told her I loved it, that I'd hung it on my refrigerator. She said she'd see me in 2 days. After she hung up, I looked at that drawing, a picture of our family, all 5 of us holding hands. She'd drawn it months ago before everything fell apart. Before she knew that families could be built on lies and still feel real to the children living in them. I thought about my father's final gift. Not the money, but the truth. The audit that had destroyed my marriage but freed me from living a fiction. Was it worth it? I still didn't know. Maybe I never would. But I knew this. You can't build a real life on a foundation of lies. Eventually, the weight of deception collapses everything, and you're left sorting through the rubble trying to find something worth saving. I'd found my children. Not all of them were mine by blood, but all of them were mine by choice now. I'd chosen to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep being their father even when it would have been easier to walk away. That choice, made every day, was the only inheritance that mattered. The truth had cost me everything, but it had also given me the chance to build something real from the ruins. Whether I succeeded or failed would depend on the choices I made going forward, not in anger, not in revenge, but in the quiet, persistent work of being present for the people who needed me. That was the lesson my father had tried to teach me. Not that the truth would set me free, but that freedom without truth was just another kind of prison. I turned off the Christmas tree lights and went to bed, knowing that in 2 days, I'd see my children again. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was real. And real was all I had left to build on.